Are you spending ages rendering every single detail in your paintings and thinking, art cannot be this slow. If it's this slow, it's not fun. When working with oil painting process such as this or this, you'll often leave trails of existing paint underneath. This will only work if those brushstrokes are on the same layer that you are painting over. This will be creating visual noise that is consistent with your value range because it will optically blend with the surroundings when you zoom out. This is just one of the ways we'll be adding illusion of detail in your art. This isn't just about being lazy, even though I have to say that I'm using these techniques sometimes just because I want to get things done. This is the secret concept artists use to sell the look and feel of scenes, while leaving time for variations or other work that needs to get done, usually within the same day. By using these techniques, I actually spent less than half a day on the details of these paintings. Before, this would have taken me literally days to do either of these scenes. Think about that. It's literally saving days of my life when I'm painting this way, and I get way more work done. And if your current goal is to get better at painting in general, think about how much faster you will improve when you direct all that time and energy to finishing more work in less time. I used to believe that more hours meant better art. In the beginning, every artist's patience for making a single painting is really low, and when you're posting art online, it's easy to get into the competitive mode with other creators on similar technical level as you, and the easiest way to impress your peers at that point is to show that you spend more time with details on one piece. This is embarrassing to admit, but I'm 100% talking from my own personal experience here, and that old work is kind of really tough to look at now because I can see my insecurities in the paintings, and it's just I don't feel proud about that work. In a lot of these videos, I say that to be an artist, you have to be brave. And here I wasn't brave, but it wasn't because I was lacking confidence. I would say that I had overconfidence compared to my own skill level. But having just technical knowledge gives you the confidence to know what to focus on. So I didn't go through some sort of mental mind shift. I just learned the art of detail averaging, and that and only that completely changed my workflow and the impact of my art. Our eyes don't process every detail equally. When someone looks at your painting, they see the big shapes, the light, the color, and their eye moves to a focal point that you hopefully have designed. Everything else is secondary, and trying to detail it all actually creates visual clutter, not impact. Understanding this frees you. It means that you don't have to render everything. You can trust your viewers to make up the lost details in their head. No matter how long we work on rendering something, we absolutely cannot rival how good and polished that element can look in the viewer's head when they finish the painting for us. We have to invite them into the process. Just think about line art sketching, for example. This is why the rough sketches often have more life in them than the cleaned up versions, because we finish the thought when we see it, but when that interactive part of looking is taken away from us by the artist doing a clean draft of that sketch, it turns the viewing experience into a passive one.
This right here is painted entirely by hand.
If I'm completely honest, sometimes I just didn't feel confident in my work, and instead of focusing on core issues, I just got stuck on details, hoping others would like my art that way. I don't think that this is just a me problem. I've been teaching concept art long enough now that I see this cycle repeated in my students. And maybe that's you as well. Be honest. Think about the last time that you were finishing a painting and being stuck in the detail phase. Is it that you actually needed those details to be in the painting, or were you just afraid to let go and show that work to others? I think it's important to understand that our ego will always be there, present somehow, holding us back. And we're not gonna overcome it. This is going to be a battle that you will be dealing with the rest of your creative career. And I urge you, if you have any kind of means that you get to the finish line that are not mentioned here in this video, please write them down in the comment section below. And maybe you can help somebody else post their work so that it doesn't get stuck on their hard drive where nobody can see it. A technical trick that I use a lot is I create my bases quite dark, and when it comes to details, I take one area that is indicative of all of the shape language and the type of detail I want to be creating in a large mass. And I use a lot of effort into one zone, and then I use Lighten blend mode layer as copies, and I copy paste that detail all over the place. This works well when you have a consistent shape language in architecture, for example, but it works even better in landscape pieces with foliage or large cliff faces, because both of those take a whole lot of time to create, but they work with this technique super well, as you can take one element, one section of a cliff face, and then just use all of your skill and effort to paint it with flat lighting, and then just copy paste it all over the place by rotating the copies, scaling the copies, flipping them horizontally, flipping them vertically, and they won't be identifiable as copies. You will get a whole lot of noisy detail that will easily detail group into one segment so that people won't have to pay attention to every single brushstroke. Your rhythm will be consistent because all of those brushstrokes are still done by you, and it will be consistent with the entire rest of the painting because it's using that same style. This is one technique I use a lot. When it comes to lighting blend mode layer, you do want your bases to be dark so that you have some editing room to move upwards in values. But I've gotten used to working from very dark bases almost always when dealing with any opaque media. So if that's not you, that's something that you want to get used to first before using Lighten layer. Otherwise, you might blow out all of your detail by just moving towards white. The real fear is that you might think that won't it look unfinished or empty? You don't have to go completely overboard the first time you try this. You can take a small, not that important segment that is not the focal point in your next piece and try detail averaging there, and just let that speed up the workflow for you. The secret to detail averaging is also detail grouping, and the detail that you are averaging this way, it's not important detail. You don't paint the detail, you paint the impression of the detail. That's the important magic that we are trying to create here. You give the viewer's eye just enough information to fill in the gaps. And there are several different guidelines, almost like handrails, that you can guide the viewer from keeping within the subject of your piece and understanding the story. For example, see this edge here? It's actually doing all the work of explaining what this entire shape is, and within the house shape, we can just focus on getting the hue and value right. But all of these brushstrokes, they're just a complete mess here, and that's by design. This is not important detail. The important detail here is the edge, not what is contained within it. A lot of art teachers say that value is the only thing that you need to focus on to get the color right, but shape can also remove the need for that right value and even the right color sometimes. These domes don't have three-dimensional shading or values. Here, it's the silhouette of this shape that's the only thing informing that these are round shapes. This visual confetti that I was talking about in my previous color theory video, lights are one element where you can really easily go overboard and still be like fairly realistic the way that you depict them. Because if you look at any nighttime scene around you when you're in a city, there are millions of lights, not just the lights shining from the ceilings and different light posts, but lights in city areas. They create reflections. That light is repeated through glass and so many different surfaces act as light sources that in painting format, you can recreate this illusion of detail by using a lot of those copy pasting techniques. And on top of Lighten blend mode, you can also use screen blend mode for these. And they work super well no matter how many times you duplicate them. When it comes to artificial lights, it doesn't even matter if they do look duplicated, because then they just look even more man-made in most situations. A big part of this is managing all of that chaotic, somewhat random detail that you are putting into your piece. And one way to do that is perspective. This is the main box that I sketched for this illustration. This is basically the entire drawing that this whole painting is based on. As the painting progresses, these big straight lines break apart and disappear. Vanishing point lines are great for sketching, but in this style they can easily demand way more attention than they are worth. This might be controversial, but I generally think people worry too much about proper perspective, especially when it comes to concept art and environment design. If someone takes this idea and starts converting this to 3D, the perspective will be perfect. As long as the perspective is close enough to be feasible, I think that's enough. I used to be way too much of a control freak when it came to turning my art into environments. Honestly, I was a super annoying person to work with back then, but now I have the perspective to think about this process from the 3D artist's perspective. Isn't it more fun when you get to have more control over your own work? In my own experience, I found that everyone on the team tends to do their best work when they have a sense of ownership over their own part. So as a concept artist, now I think that being good at the job also means that at some point you just have to let go and let the idea evolve and get better in the hands of others, because they're also doing their best to make that environment the best that it can be, to bring it to life and give a sense of place to the place that you both are creating. In a nutshell, all of these methods can be described as learning how to hint at detail rather than rendering it all. And this is a skill like everything else. You can go overboard, you can make mistakes with it, but there is a very safe way, like I mentioned, to start from a non-focal point area, to start somewhere where it's not that important. It is possible to learn this, and it's relatively safe. You're not gonna destroy your painting if you use any of these techniques. So where do we actually put the details when we have time for them? I recommend using the same example that I always tell when I'm teaching landscape painting. Go walk in a forest and look at a detail in that forest. You will have one focal point area that you can see in great detail, but it will be surrounded by incredibly chaotic nature. All of that would be good area for detail averaging, and that focal point area, that one detail that you are looking at, hopefully in your illustration, this means some kind of a story point, something that is important to showcase to the viewer, no matter how far or close to the camera it is, but it should have a story reason to be that detailed. Now, if you take non-focal point area and give it that same level of detail, you raise the expectation of what we expect every other element in that same painting to be rendered with. When you start detailing a non-important element, you are actually creating an expectation for every area in that painting that is of the same visual value to be at that level of polish. So that's how you end up in these sort of treadmills to nowhere, where you're just detailing a painting like it's a coloring book and not really an art piece that has something to say. That's why I can't really call this painting technique lazy, as you can't go on autopilot at any point in the process. But if you're listening to these videos, I think you're already committed to learning art and learning these more advanced techniques of painting, and you already know that this is a hard skill that requires patience and you're ready to put in that work. When you have just a flat area of color, you better get used to using simultaneous contrast. And there's one easy way to do that doesn't require a lot of skill. I use the power button trick by setting the power button to turn the colors black and white. Here you can see a tutorial on how you can do that on your iPad. And when I have everything black and white, I add a luminosity layer on top of my painting. And then I simplify noisy areas, because when you're using these copy pastes in Lighten and Screen and normal blend modes, you might find that some areas are a little bit too noisy. On that luminosity layer that is on top of everything, you just pick what looks like gray values. Remember that you are actually painting in color, even though your screen is in black and white. So you color pick the gray values that look like they can simplify those noisy areas into simpler shapes and paint on top of them. And then when you put the colors back on, you can use those colors through the luminosity layer as hues that are the same value, but they just add simultaneous contrast by being a different hue next to each other, and then just clean it up. This way you can get rid of areas where the noisy detail becomes too distracting. Then, when you put the colors back on with the power button, you will probably notice that some colors look quite off and ugly. So I recommend having an extra step of doing a normal blend mode layer and changing the colors to something that makes sense if there are areas that look ugly after that previous luminosity layer trick. These small techniques add up, and you will be able to produce work faster, finish more projects, and explore more ideas and grow your portfolio exponentially. When you're learning art, finishing and solving more visual problems just accelerates your skill growth. Doing the details and doing the polish work, I understand that is fun, but that doesn't grow your skills. And it doesn't exercise your imagination. Especially when you're doing concept art, the whole idea generation process, that is the work. So if you're able to do 10 paintings in a time that you would normally do just one painting, you have used up more of your imagination. You have exercised the skill of imagining new visual possibilities way more. And now that skill is further ahead than the person who spent all that time doing just one painting. And in most scenarios, let's be clear that we probably are making art for the internet. So your art will look just as good in small scale as most people experience it. Now, this is just my personal opinion. If you are a regular viewer of this channel, you know that I like my brushstrokes, and I think that it actually makes your art look better in large scale as well. But I acknowledge that this is a personal preference. I like my gritty brushstrokes. If you're not into that, I understand. But either way, you will be able to attract a wider audience because your work has the impact, clarity, and that wow factor without sacrificing speed. It stands out far more, and it looks effortless. There's something about paintings that look like they were easy to paint that makes us want to paint as well. There's somehow easier to get into that feeling when we can see the process in the work. You're no longer just competing on who can render the most pixels in insane detail, but on who can create art that doesn't just illustrate a place, but lets the viewers participate in the construction of its mood and story. At its core, this isn't just about efficiency or making your art look polished. This technique is about unlocking true artistic confidence that I talked about earlier. A lot of artists want confidence, and they think it's just about inhabiting a certain kind of mood or mode. But true confidence in art, the kind that leads to powerful, confident brushstrokes, comes from one thing only: knowing your message. Before you even pick up your brush, get crystal clear on what the story, the feeling, the single point of your art is. What are you trying to say? Once you know that, everything else becomes secondary. You can then confidently average details because you know they're not harming your message. They're actively serving it by letting that one clear thing shine through. When you're confident in your message, you know exactly what to focus on and what to let go of. That's where decisive, confident brushstrokes come from, not from a feeling, but from clear intention. This method empowers you to paint with that kind of certainty. So if you want to do so, you now have the tools and techniques to stop wasting days on details and make your art look incredibly impactful. But what about getting your colors right so they align with this style? Make sure you check out this video to understand color design beyond basics, and hit that subscribe button right now because I'll be covering more painting techniques like this in upcoming videos. I'm Mikko and I'll see you in those. Bye!